Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast, coming to you from DraftKings Studios with your hosts, Kyle Borgononi and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in, one and all. No Kyle today. No Southern drawl. But it's Matthew Betz and Andy Holloway today. How you doing, Matt?
Oh, man, so good. I was going to say, for a second, Kyle, you sound really different.
Yeah. More intelligent, better looking?
Definitely all the above. Yeah, for sure. I am doing great. To answer your question, I'm super excited for the show. Hopefully, Andy, you can bring a little magic here to the show. We told people that if they listen to the show, they're guaranteed to win the Million Maker this week, so no pressure.
At least 25% of the time when you play it, you'll win it if you tune in today.
Yep.
No, this will be a lot of fun. I mean, you and I I don't think we've ever done a pod together, right?
Oh, I don't think so, actually, which is shocking over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a badge of honor for me, but at this point, those walls have been broken down. Now, no, I'm just kidding. We love you, Betsy. No, this will be a lot of fun. I mean, DFS, for those of you listening, you've been privileged to enjoy the insights of Kyle the Borgogan and Matthew Betz throughout all of 2021 so far. Us on the footballers side, we have been thrilled with just the listener response to the advice you guys have given and the level of effort and insight that you've provided. And so for me, this is a great privilege to be able to walk through the show with you today, because DFS is new for all of us out here in Arizona. And so while I did have a very fortunate showdown result in one of my games, I'm still brand new. And so I think at the same time as we walk through this show today, I'm taking in as much as I can. I'm part host, part listener as well as we break these things down, and I'll certainly share with you. Like, I've had a lot of fun developing my own strategy around DFS and gleaning a lot from you guys as I dip my toe in for the first time. And this is exciting because more and more states are able to do this, and it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Are you enjoying the DFS process so far? I know it's brand new, like you just said. Like, what's been the most fun part about it, other than almost winning $1 million? But
that was number one.
So, yeah, of course,
that was the best part.
Of course,
no,
yeah.
I think.
I was going to say, as someone,
go ahead.
As someone who hasn't played before, we get a lot of new players, new listeners that are like, I'm dipping my toe in. I don't know what to do. But you have had success, so maybe you can share real quick before we start the content for the show. Like, how do you jump in as a new player? Because I feel like we get a lot of those questions.
Sure. Yeah, I think one thing I'll say is it surprised me how much I love DFS. Like, we have always been partners with DFS companies, with the Fantasy Footballers Podcast, and we've never been able to play. So we've done like free tournaments and things like that where we can engage. But obviously you guys have kind of taken that mantle on the DFS side, and you guys have been able to play. I wasn't expecting to love it the way that I love it. We also got sports betting in Arizona, so we've been able to dip our toe in there and on the DFS side, and we've obviously got our redraft leagues and dynasty leagues, and I just found myself more drawn to DFS than the sports betting side. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's maybe I'm OCD and I like pulling down the old screen and seeing the refresh of my placement throughout the day. I don't know if it's the fact that, like, we're so used to being in the fantasy football redraft world that, just something new and exciting to check for these games and having a little extra skin in the game has been fun. But I've enjoyed it. And for us, or at least for myself, I haven't approached it with I don't know. Did you see the video of Big Ben with the throw mechanics video that's been going around?
The one where he falls down to the right?
No. He had Chris Sims interviewed him. I think it was old, and I'll make the comparison here. But like, he asked Big Ben, he's like Chris Sims is a real like passer mechanics nerd. And he's like, oh, what do you have the 2.5 grip on the hand, and do you do this thing and that? And Big Ben had no clue what he was talking about. Big Ben was like, no, I just find the receiver and throw him the ball. Like, he's never worked with a quarterback coach. He's never worked on his mechanics. He's never tried to refine a mechanic. Like, it just came naturally to him. And so in some ways, I feel like my approach to DFS has been, well, we've been reviewing games for 10 years. And so I've been in the narrative world. I've been in the world of like, I'm building these, like for the Showdown series things, I'm building narratives, and then I'm building my lineups out of these narratives. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I've had some success doing it, and it's been fun to take the things that we know on the fantasy football side and then combine that with DFS. And, as the weeks have gone by, I've become more acclimated with like our lineup generator and the DFS Pass, and, doing some more, I hear you and Kyle talk so much about, these different, exposure levels for certain players and philosophies around DFS. But man, it's just been really fun to engage with something new.
Yeah, for sure. And once you have that first sweat, you're hooked. So yes, if you haven't played a ton of DFS, if you're just joining in for the first time with us today, come check out the DFS Pass. Come play with us. That's what we want with you guys. It should be a fun show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing here, we got another listener screenshot from this past week. Coming through on Twitter, somebody bringing home $5,800 on 227 in entries.
That'll work.
That's exciting. That'll work on a weekly basis. The funny story about my shared Millie Maker win is that, and I don't know if you've heard this or if I shared it in the Slack, but I wasn't following along. I didn't do the sweat.
Right.
I had a friend I hadn't seen in like 2 years. I had to meet him for coffee, and I'm like, I'm not going to be that friend that's checking his phone constantly. I know I'm kind of in it, but I was in the hundreds or something at the time. And man, I got towards like an hour into that convo, and I just happened to pull down and check it for the first time. And I'm sitting there in first. I'm getting phone calls from people. But there's something to be said about like it's probably pretty fun to check it at the end of a game too. So it goes both directions.
Definitely.
All right, let's jump right in.
Straight cash, homie.
Oh, this is great. I get all these new drops that I get to push on this side. This is fun.
So fun.
So fun. All right, so what do you got at the quarterback position this week, Betsy?
Yeah, if you're looking to spend up this week, there's no negative things to say about Kyler Murray. I mean, what he is doing right now is insane. This Cardinals offense, over 400 yards of offense in every game so far this year. It's got a nice total on the slate. So if you want to pay up for safety at quarterback this week, we like Kyler Murray. He is $8K on DraftKings, so it is expensive, but on FanDuel, it's way more affordable just because their pricing is a little softer. So you can get up to Kyler Murray at $8,500 over there. And the other name I'll throw out as well, Justin Herbert, 6.8K going up against Cleveland. Herbert just seems so dialed in and so safe right now. 7 passing touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. And I feel like the Browns have kind of been this Jekyll and Hyde type of defense, right? Like we've seen some good games, most notably last week. They took away Kirk Cousins. But the games that they have succeeded on defense, they've been able to get after the quarterback. This Chargers offensive line has been playing lights out. They are bottom 5 in terms of sacks allowed to their quarterback, a.k.a. that's great. They're top 5 in that metric. So I think Herbert will be in a clean pocket most of the game, and we love his pass catchers, of course. So those are my 2 cash picks this week.
Yeah, I like hearing that about Herbert. I don't know, is Jadeveon Clowney going to be back out there this week? I know he left early last week, and it's funny because I think the first 2 weeks Herbert put up 320 plus yards, but didn't have the touchdown piece. Then he's kind of been lower on the yards. Now he's got the touchdown piece. If you get all of that put together, you're going to have a week-winning week for Herbert. What are your thoughts? I have Dak in here at 6.9K facing the Giants, one of the highest over-unders of the week. 4 touchdowns last week, low yardage totals, but they seem to have figured some things out on offense. What are your thoughts on Dak?
Yeah, we're going to talk about this game in detail from a GPP perspective in a few minutes, but I agree with you. The Cowboys offense, I think they're going to smash this week. They are at home. They are, last time I looked, a full touchdown favorite in this game. I guess the only concern that I have is just in the past 3 weeks, we've seen Dak's pass volume come down quite a bit, and maybe it's just because they've been so dang efficient that they don't need to throw the ball a ton. But Zeke could be the one that walks away with the touchdown. That is a little concern for me, but at the same time, like, how can you argue Dak at home with a huge implied team total? So yeah, for sure. I wrote him up in the DFS Pass in my GPP picks, so I'm more approaching him from that angle this week. But by all means, I have nothing negative to say about Dak Prescott. He's been lights out.
And then I also want to throw Trevor Lawrence out there at 5.8K at home against Tennessee. We spent a lot of time talking on the Fantasy Footballers podcast today just with when you see the Tennessee Titan logo on the jersey across from you. Right now, that's a really, really good thing. Obviously, this is another game where they lost DJ Chark, but you have Laviska Shenault, you got Marvin Jones, you got Dan Arnold into the mix now. So at that price, if you want to bargain shop, that's where I went. Running backs, we both have. How do you have a lineup without King Henry in it right now?
Yeah, there's not much to say
advisable.
About this. It's just, I mean, if you're playing cash games this week, my personal strategy this week is I do not want to get buried behind the mountain that is Derrick Henry against the Jaguars. I mean, you just have this image, right, of Thursday Night Football, stiff arm after stiff arm for like a 90-yard touchdown run. We've seen him just destroy this defense in the past, and it really is a situation where in past seasons in DFS, it was way more advisable to fade Derrick Henry because of the fact that he was a one-dimensional running back. Not this year. Mr. 10% target share, Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
I like Derrick Henry a lot this week. I know he's expensive. He's $9,000 on DraftKings, but for the touches that he's seeing, I mean, what is it, like 35 on average over the last 3 weeks or something ridiculous?
It's insane.
So if you want the safety, pay up for him.
All right. And then what do you got beyond King Henry? Zeke has been on a roll. You got him at 7K right now against the Giants in that big game.
Yeah, and it's the fact that I think we can see them play with a pretty positive game script, like we talked about, 7-point home favorites. You know, Zeke's just been automatic, and I know early in the season it was, well, what do we do with Zeke? They're just throwing all the time, and over the last 3 weeks, he's been the focal point. So he's been awesome, and I just want to point out, in our DFS rankings, which use, Andy, your, Mike, and Jason's projections, he is our top point per dollar projection on the entire site this week. So I like Zeke a lot. I may not play him in cash, I'm not sure, but regardless, I'll be playing some lineups for sure with Ezekiel Elliott in there.
As an extension of that conversation, how do you feel about Pollard this week with the game script in mind and just how efficient he's been? Is there a chance he gets more play and ends up being a value as well?
Yeah, it's sort of tough. I mean, certainly not in cash games. I don't think you can go there because in those formats, we just care about safety and volume, right? And, you know, in GPPs, there's no rules, basically. If you want to go off the board there with Tony Pollard, it's totally fine. We've seen him, like you said, be super efficient, and full PPR scoring on DraftKings is fine as well. So, yeah, you can mix him in a game stack for sure.
And then one of the starts of the week that we had on today's show was Leonard Fournette at home against Miami. 5.2K. You've got him as one of your cash picks here.
Yes, and if our listeners know for the last couple of years, if there has ever been a week where it's chalk Leonard Fournette week, I have a negative just outlook on this player, and that's my bias. But this week, I'm trying to push it to the side because of the fact that he is going up against the Dolphins, who are just bleeding fantasy points to running backs. And last week, we saw Leonard Fournette be an every down back for this Bucs offense. Of course, it depends on if Gio Bernard is out there with the MCL injury. And then Ronald Jones just seems to be in Bruce Arians' doghouse, as he is 3 or 4 times every year. Now, I do have a little trepidation about Leonard Fournette, and it's just because of Bruce Arians. That's it. But if you told me he was going to get 20 touches at that price tag against Miami, all day in cash.
Well, speaking of 20 touches, the other name I'll throw out there is James Robinson at 6K. He has that matchup against Tennessee. 20-plus touches for 20-plus opportunities for 2 consecutive weeks. Top 10 fantasy finishes for 2 consecutive weeks. And, I don't see Carlos Hyde coming in there and siphoning more than 20% of the snaps probably this week. And they're going to need to lean on Robinson. So I think he's interesting. What about the wide receiver position? Where are you turning?
Yeah, if you're looking to pay up this week, for me, it's Devontae Adams. I want to point out to our listeners, he is the same price on FanDuel as he is on DraftKings, which we always tell you guys is a misprice if he's the same price on FanDuel. That's just too cheap for Devontae Adams. For me, he's a cash game lock over on that site. Obviously, if you want to pay up from on DraftKings, you can definitely do that. Going up against the Bengals, who, yeah, they've been a little bit better this year in the secondary, but Devontae Adams' target share and usage around the goal line just makes him so safe. So if you're paying up for wide receiver, I love him this week. He's 8.2K.
All right. I have Justin Jefferson. He's up at 7.7K right now, has the home matchup against Detroit. He has been reliable this season, and I think he should be a lock in cash lineups.
Yeah, I love it. They should smash this game.
Who else you got?
All right, we have talked a lot about some players and some teams that I'm a little worried about. I don't know if we could be all in on the Jaguars, but without DJ Chark, there is opportunity, and we have seen Marv Jones, shout out to Kyle. That's his boy, so we got to give him some love. Marv, 5.7K against Tennessee. And then I'll also throw out Laviska Shenault at 4.8K. Again, the Titans, whatever you think about the Jaguars being a bad team on defense, the Titans are just as bad. So this could be one of those games where it's just two bad defenses with good to competent offenses that could really put up points. So I'm excited about this matchup. We don't talk about it as a game stack this week, but yeah, just too cheap for the volume. And you talked about playing Trevor Lawrence, so it makes sense if you want to stack those guys together.
Yeah, it seems like that 4.8K, especially in tournaments, is a player that you got to work into some lineups with Laviska. The fact that he got some downfield targets, the fact that they don't have Chark rest of season, they're going to need him. They just will to move the football, and their defense isn't good enough to let them just run the football. So I love that. We both have Antonio Brown here in the mix at 5.2K. Came right back into a huge target share again last week, just missed the touchdown on a couple plays.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what you want to do. You want to go back to those players that were so close to putting up a huge week and just missed it. So you follow the volume, you follow the targets. I don't know what it is about Tom and AB, but those two dudes love each other. And this is a matchup where, we know that the Bucs, they want to throw the ball. I mean, they've just been so pass heavy that any of these guys, really, Mike Evans or Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown, can go off in any week. And I definitely want to have some exposure to that Bucs passing attack. And just what are your thoughts on like Mike Evans? Do you think he sees Xavier Howard in coverage? Like if you're trying to pick a cornerback matchup, or does it not really matter to you?
Yeah, how do you approach the price differential between those three guys? Because you kind of feel like you go into every week, and I don't know if I view them very differently. Like you said, I mean, maybe I'm looking at the top cornerback matchup, but on a week-to-week basis, looking at those three players, sometimes I'm just looking at the cheapest.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of times I'll just use the roster percentage to guide where I go, especially in tournaments.
Sure.
And right now we have Mike Evans as the least popular of the three, and then Chris Godwin being the most popular. So AB is going to probably come in somewhere between 8 and 12%, I would say, in tournaments. Potentially lower. I don't think a lot of people are playing that game stack. And so it is a way to get contrarian on the slate. And really, if you want to talk about the Dolphins too, right? I mean, they just lost Will Fuller on IR. They just traded Jakeem Grant. Someone has to catch the football. So that could turn into like a sneaky game stack that not a lot of people are going to play this week. So I lean AB and then Godwin, and I think Evans would probably be the lowest for me this week.
What do you think about, when you're talking about safety? You're talking about targets. You're talking about Deontay Johnson right now. If he's on the field, he's been reliable. How do you feel about 6.5K facing the Denver defense this week? Got the word today, Big Ben, there's no chance they'd ever think about benching Big Ben. And we know Big Ben likes himself some Deontay Johnson.
I just can't stop reviewing the video of him falling to the side.
Oh, man.
That's been viral on Twitter.
That was so embarrassing. And you watch it over and over again, and it doesn't get less entertaining.
No, it's just, it's gold. But the target share is absolutely insane. He is the first, second, and third read for Big Ben, and then it's Najee Harris, right? So, yes, especially if Chase Claypool sits again, I think he's a fine cash game play. I question the upside in tournaments just because of the fact that it's such a low total. I think it's 39.5 points. I mean, gross.
I know.
But he's going to see a bunch of volume, and on full PPR sites like DraftKings, if you can rack up 7, 8, 9 catches for 60 yards in cash games, that's going to be just fine. So, yes, I think he's a great play.
Let's continue the trip down the Jacksonville matchup road. We both love Dan Arnold this week at 2.9K. It seems sneaky, but I think this guy's going to get a ton of targets.
Yeah, I mean, I read up the Thursday Night Football preview for the DFS Pass every week, and I warned people. I was like, I don't think Dan Arnold's going to play that much. He was just traded like 3 days before the game, and what does he do? He comes out and he's like running a ton of routes and seeing targets. I'm like, what is happening? So he is clearly a part of the offense. They lose DJ Chark. We talked about the matchup just being beautiful, and he's so cheap. So if you want to punt it off and just go to the basement with pricing on DraftKings, Darren Arnold at 2.9K I think is totally fine to do. And also we need to change our, I think, frame of reference on this slate because of the fact that we don't really have great tight end options at all.
We're missing
there's
a
no
ton
Travis
of them, right?
Kelce. There's no Mark Andrews on Monday Night Football. On Thursday night, it's the Seattle guys
Higbee.
plus Tyler Higbee. Yeah, Dawson Knox has been great. He's on Sunday Night
There's no
Football.
Kyle
There's
Pitts
no Kelce.
either.
There's no Kyle Pitts. Like, who are we playing at tight end? So, yeah, Dan Arnold sounds disgusting and gross, but really on this slate, he's a fine play at his price tag at 2.9K.
And then I want to throw Mike Gesicki out there. He's at 4.2, so he's quite a bit more expensive. But the last 2 weeks, I mean, you just talked about the pieces missing in Miami, and I think we know they're going to get scored on in this game. You may have just, whether it's Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki's had 18 targets over the last 2 weeks. Could be kind of sneaky on a week when, like you said, there's so much depletion at the tight end position.
Yep, I like it a lot. And then real quick before we move on to defense, I will just throw out for the listeners, if you're playing over on FanDuel, they just refused to move Darren Waller's price tag. He is 7.4K over there, which is too cheap for a guy that has the upside and potential target volume that he's going to see. So if you're playing cash games over there for me this week, I am paying up for Darren Waller.
That's great. What do you got for defense?
Yes, this is going to be the chalk defense of the week, but I do think it's okay to play them in cash. This is the Washington football team going up against Jameis Winston. They are cheap. They are 2.3K, and it just kind of feels like the Washington football team is going to have a good week at some point on defense. Why not against Jameis Winston, right? So they're so cheap. I won't play them in tournaments, I don't think, and the rationale is that looking at some of the studies that Kyle and I did in the offseason was that DraftKings points do not positively correlate to salary. So just because they tell us that, the Patriots at 4.7K or whatever they are is the best play of the slate, it's just so hard to predict scoring. So I'm going to just have a pool of defenses that I think are fine in tournaments and go there. But in cash games, I mean, by all means, go down to that basement price tag at 2.3K with the football team.
Yeah, when we were talking about this matchup on the other show today, it just feels like this could be the game, like you said, for the breakthrough defensive performance at home. Winston is Winston, so you have an opportunity there, and then you have the Dallas defense, which has shown itself to be a playmaking defense. You have them facing New York. Daniel Jones has a tendency to turn the ball over, and if the shoe's going to drop there, that's 2.8K for Dallas.
Yep, I love it. And really, one other thing to note too is just in games that we project a lot of passing volume, that's how defenses score in fantasy. So you want Daniel Jones playing from behind, having to drop back over and over again against the Cowboys, who, like you said, have been pretty timely with turnovers and getting after the quarterback and all those sort of things. So yes, they're a great tag at 2.K.
What about Arizona? They're at home. Their defense has shown the same thing. They can, Byron Murphy intercepting passes, number 3 against the pass. They're at 2.9K, and you may have a shaky quarterback situation, either with Jimmy G starting but with some limitations, or you've got a rookie and, maybe Trey Lance comes out and blows the doors off, but it's going to be hard on the road against the division mate, making your debut with Chandler Jones breathing down your neck.
Yeah, totally viable. Absolutely willing to go there for sure. I wrote them up as well in the DFS Pass. And then the other one that I'll mention, it's Pittsburgh against Mr. Irresponsible, as you guys always say, Drew Lock.
Yeah.
He's turning the football over at least once or twice. So they make for a decent play. And then over on FanDuel, again, with the pricing being soft, you can get up to the Patriots at 5K if you want to. Oh, boy. Taking on Davis Mills. He had negative DraftKings points last week, threw 4 interceptions, and now my man Davis is going up against Bill Belichick off of a loss. If you have a second, just reach out to Davis. I mean, come on, send this guy some positive vibes. I am so worried about the Texans.
It feels like the Simpsons gif where the grandpa walks in the door, hangs his hat up, turns around, and then takes that. I mean, that's what Davis should do when he walks out on the field, without question.
Absolutely.
That's going to be a tough one. But, yeah. Now, would your philosophy on the Pittsburgh defense change at all if Teddy B ends up trending towards playing?
I think
or you still feel okay?
They're probably less exciting than if Drew Lock plays, but they're still viable. And really in tournaments, especially if you do want to pay up for a defense, a lot of opponents that we're going to play against on DraftKings are not going to do that. So if you predict a potentially good game from Pittsburgh on the defensive side, it's a way to get different.
All right, sounds good. Let's move on.
Stack Attack.
All right. Let me ask you a question before we jump into Stack Attack, because, like I said, I'm a sponge, right? This is a brand new year for us Arizonans getting to play DFS, and I'm putting you on the spot here, so you can take a second. But are there a couple of high level? This is DFS for the rest of us, right? This show. Are there a couple of high level things that when you're talking to somebody, maybe you got a friend that's new to DFS that are like, man, if I had known this on day one when I got into DFS, or this is something that just kind of, no matter what during the week, I'm looking here. What were some of the things that maybe you made mistakes with, or things that are just core to the way you approach it?
Yeah, one thing that this is an easy answer for me because I made a ton of mistakes when I first started playing. And one thing that I would do is just get so stuck on a narrative or like a take that I had early in the week and then not adapt to enough of the news or be willing to kind of play the other guy, especially at the wide receiver position. I mean, Tyler Lockett gets such a bad rap for consistency, right? But we know that every wide receiver is inconsistent, and the data that we looked at with the correlation score for the wide receiver 1 and the quarterback is like 0.55. The correlation from the wide receiver 2 is 0.53. So at any given week, it could be DeAndre Hopkins or it could be AJ Green or heck, Christian Kirk. And I think I didn't embrace that variance enough in tournaments. I said, I'm playing this stack this week. That's it. No questions asked. And what really I think the advantage is if you play multiple lineups, you can get exposure to these guys in different ways so that you're not sort of stuck holding the bag, and it helps to reduce the variance, I think, a little bit. And as well, it just kind of gives you more shots at the lotto ticket that we're trying to hit in tournaments. So be willing to play multiple pass catchers or different pass catchers with your quarterback, because in reality, we can say all the stuff that we like about a guy or the cornerback matchup and all that sort of stuff. But when it comes down to it, there's so much variance associated with wide receivers and passing the football that you need to embrace it in tournaments.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Let's go here. San Francisco, Arizona. Beautiful 50-point over-under. The DK Sportsbook line here, Arizona minus 5.5 at home. I'm not positive. I think maybe that went up a half a point over the course of the week. I don't know, maybe some question marks with the San Francisco offense. But this is a game we're targeting for some stacks. How are you approaching this matchup?
Yeah, this is one that I think it could go over. I think it does go over the total. And the reason is, these Cardinals games, they're averaging the 3rd most combined points. Meanwhile, 49ers games are averaging the 8th most combined points. So it's a game that I think really has a lot of appeal to it. And I usually like to stack on the team that's favored. So I'm looking at the Cardinals this week. We talked about Kyler Murray. Obviously, nothing negative to say about the guy, averaging 318 yards, 2.3 passing touchdowns per game. He's found the end zone with his legs in 3 or 4 weeks. So he's great. The question becomes, where do you go at the wide receiver position? Because it's just so spread out. And this feels like a week that whenever I see DeAndre Hopkins on the board, and I know he's going to come in at less than 10% in tournaments, you take your shot. So for me, I really like DeAndre Hopkins this week. He's had a couple of quiet weeks. We know that he's so talented. You can't keep him down that long. And this 49ers secondary just 2 weeks ago was playing Josh Norman as starting corner. They are super banged up in the secondary. I think he's going to win this week, but love Kyler. And then, maybe I'll kick it back to you in terms of the San Francisco side. Debo has been awesome. George Kittle has been so quiet, but he's George Kittle. Is this the week, Andy, Mr. Million Maker? Is this the week for George Kittle in this game stack?
I don't think so. I don't think it is. And I wish that it was. I think I just got word we're recording this Thursday afternoon, but I don't think he practiced again. So I don't know if this is going to be that breakout game. We keep waiting for it. It's a bewildering thing to say out loud that Max Williams, Dos Equis, who looks like he is at least 30 pounds over where he should be, is putting up performances, getting targets, and becoming an integral part of this Cardinal offense, and we're sitting here scratching our heads waiting for George Kittle to have that breakout. Last week the targets were there, right? A couple of big plays just missed, but I think I'm a little shaky with what happens behind center this week. And, all bets are off when, even with Debo, there's some hesitancy because we don't know what that Trey Lance offense is going to look like on day one. And if he ends up being the starter, yeah, he in and of himself is a great play, but I don't know if he's got eyes for Debo the way that Jimmy Garoppolo does. And so, I think there are some people that are looking at Debo up in, over 7,000 and then looking at Brandon Ayuk at 4,500 saying, I can take a shot there in a tournament and maybe I catch that Brandon Ayuk week.
Yeah, I don't hate that call at all. He's just dirt cheap. And we did just get news actually today as we're recording that Jimmy G did not practice again on Thursday, so it is looking not great for Jimmy out there this week. So if it is Trey Lance, we just know that rushing quarterbacks take away some volume from passing. So this is not a game stack for me this week that I would go like double Cardinals, double 49ers. I'm not going full stack, but I do think that you could pick one and bring it back with. But reality is we just don't know who it's going to be. So take your shot, use the roster percentage report to find a guy that you can get different with in the DFS pass, and then go from there. But I do think Ayuk has to have a game sooner or later, right? I mean, come on.
With the snaps being where they're at again, I think he has to. But man, it might be a bit of a road to figuring out what that offense does with Trey Lance behind center. But I'm all in. I'm with you. I've got some tournament lineups in with the Murray Hopkins stack because I had the exact same thought that you did with the pricing and with it's time, right? Like this is a Hopkins due to kind of take at least a bigger chunk of that target share that he's been so benevolently sharing with Christian Kirk and AJ Green and Rondale Moore and Max Williams over the last few weeks. Certainly don't have a Ramsey on the other side to disturb it. So let's get in on that stack this week.
Love it. What are you thinking on your Vegas pick?
Oh, that's right. Look, I feel like the three of us here being Homer Cardinal fans, like the more we've doubted them this year, the better they've played. But I guess I'll go Arizona. I think the shakiness at quarterback on the other side, I think the Cardinals will take care of business at home and be able to cover the 5.5.
All right, I like it. And
what do you got?
The over in this. I like the over in this one, and I want to say the Niners because it's a divisional game, but if it is Trey Lance, I lean with laying the points rather with Arizona, but it doesn't feel right. I'm gonna do it anyway. I'll take the Cardinals.
Okay, I appreciate that. That is a quite the courtesy.
Didn't want to get
for me.
fired on the show.
Well, it's funny because Trey could probably have a spectacular fantasy performance and still have like a couple mistakes, a couple turnovers that turn the tides in this one. Let's move on to that game. We've already teased it a little bit, but the Giants, the Cowboys in Dallas, implied point total for Dallas almost 30 points. DK has the line at Dallas -7, 52 point over under. There's a lot to like about this game, right? How are you approaching stack decisions here? You talked about Dak and worrying about the goal line a little bit with Zeke and how well they're running the football. What's the Dallas Dak combo that you like the most?
Yeah, this is a great spot in my opinion to go back to CeeDee Lamb. I love Lamb this week after 2 bad games. He's a guy that you just can't keep down for so long, and I don't think Dalton Schultz 32.5% target share over the last 2 weeks is sustainable. He's a tight end A, and B, he's Dalton Schultz. So I think that he can be fine in a game stack if you want to go with him with Dak. But for me, I'm looking at a CeeDee Lamb this week. He is cheap. His price came down by $500 on DraftKings, and I love playing wide receivers that, DraftKings is pretty sensitive to performance week to week. So whenever they drop a guy in price, I'm looking to go right back to him. So I'm going to CeeDee Lamb in this matchup, 6.2K.
I really like that. Do you find yourself having Amari Cooper hesitancy in general, just knowing he's dealing with the hamstring and the fact that you could see this guy limp off and injure weak at any moment?
Yeah, for sure. And Kyle played him last week in cash, and we were texting during the game. He's just like, dude, Amari Cooper in and out of the lineup, like so mad. And then all of a sudden he scores a touchdown. Kyle's so happy all of a sudden again. But yes, I do think that is a little bit of a concern. I know they're saying it's not a huge deal, but anytime a player that plays a skill position has a hamstring issue, it is a factor. So that's why I prefer CeeDee Lamb this week. But again, if you wanted to sprinkle Amari Cooper in large field tournaments, certainly you can do it.
The Jason Garrett revenge game narrative. You've got the Giants side of the ball here. Daniel Jones, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but he's not far off of Jalen Hurts rushing totals this year. So that's one of those special elements he brings to the game. He's 6,000 on DraftKings. I know Mike likes him this week. I also last week Kadarius Toney was one of my favorite, kind of dart throw players in tournaments. I think he was 3,000 last week. He's up to 4 this week. But I don't know if we're going to see Sterling Shepard out there again or Darius Slayton. How are you viewing the other side of the ball here?
Yeah, it's a great point because really it matters a lot. Like if Sterling Shepard's out there, then I'm not super interested in Evan Ingram. And, if Darius Slayton's out there, then it takes away a little bit from potentially Kadarius Toney. So those two guys are the most important injuries to monitor in this game. And if they sit, I like the call with Kadarius Toney if you want to go with a really cheap option. We saw him get a little bit more work last week. But to me as well, I know Evan Ingram is just like the grossest name in fantasy when you talk about him because you know exactly what he's going to do. You get excited, you see the routes, you see the targets, and what does he do? Put up like 6 DraftKings points, right? But again, on a slate where like we need someone to play a tight end, he is cheap. He's 3.2K, so I think he's probably viable as a bring back option here. Again, really don't feel super confident about it. In my opinion, he's got a pretty low floor. So I don't know that I'm looking there in cash games, but I think if you want to stack this in tournaments, Evan Ingram is fine. And then what are your thoughts on Kenny G? I feel like we haven't seen a Kenny G game in a while, but this game environment is going to be great.
Yeah, and I think he's teasing us a little bit recently, especially last game, getting higher up there in the yardage totals. I'm pretty optimistic with the trajectory of Kenny G. He was banged up in training camp. He was obviously frustrated early in the season, but I'm okay taking a shot there. He's going to compete and he's going to be a touchdown threat. Touchdowns have been a problem for Daniel Jones this year, but if you're going to catch it in a divisional game, I don't mind it. I think he's heading the right direction.
Yeah, I like it. And this is a game too that I don't think, listeners, like you need to get locked into a certain strategy. Like if you're asking us, on Twitter, or if you're messaging us, we're in Discord sometimes in the DFS channel. If you're saying, hey, should I play this guy in this game? The answer is probably yes in a stack, right? You just be willing to create multiple lineups around this game because there's going to be points. And we know just with correlation, like if Dak and the Cowboys put up a ton of points, they're going to push Daniel Jones to have to put up points. So I'm excited about this game. I'll probably have a couple different stacks where it's, Zeke on one side and then I go Daniel Jones and maybe Kenny Golladay, or vice versa where it's Dak and CeeDee Lamb coming back with Kenny G, something like that. But definitely get creative, definitely play this game. I think it's going to be a ton of fun for fantasy.
I'm with you. Let's go Green Bay here. Green Bay at 3-1, going to the 3-1 Cincinnati Bengals. DK Sportsbook line, Green Bay 3.5-point road favorites here, 50-point over-under. But I think one of the big storylines, maybe a product of, maybe that's why we get that high over-under, is Jair Alexander. He's got the injury. Joe Burrow may get T. Higgins back in this one. There's some things to like here, and we're wondering if, on our redraft side, if Joe Burrow is not going to see the passing volume continue to increase as he becomes more comfortable in the pocket off the injury. I mean, do you agree with that narrative that they're going to put, Zach Taylor has been known for throwing the football. Now you lose Joe Mixon. He may have no choice but to bring Joe Burrow along even faster.
Yeah, I'm with you. And we talk about this a lot on our show of like in DFS, if you wait for it to happen, you're too late. You need to be ahead of the curve. And so I'm going to be playing some Joe Burrow stacks this week for sure. We saw it last week, and I know they were trailing like the entire game, so they kind of had to throw a lot. But who says Aaron Rodgers and the Packers can't hang 20 points on him in the first half and they have to do the exact same thing? And yes, I agree. I think they do regress to what Zach Taylor wants to do, which is throw the football. And the offensive line for the Bengals has only allowed Joey B to be sacked one time in the last 2 weeks. So maybe they see that and they say, okay, like our offensive line is playing better. Burrow's a month into the season. He's more comfortable. Jamar Chase is balling out. We got T. Higgins back. Tyler Boyd's doing his thing in the slot. Let's sling it. So I do want to be ahead of the curve here. I will for sure be playing some Joe Burrow in this one.
A lot of talk about Samaje Perine and Chris Evans potentially sharing the load, or if Joe Mixon happens to sit, again, could put more pressure on the passing game. Like you said, Green Bay is going to put up points. Last week, the Randall Cobb start was a big one for people. How do you feel about chasing that this week at 4,000, though?
I don't love it.
No, I don't think I do either. I think that was lightning in a bottle.
And you played a lineup with him in it last week. And I said to you, what's the process here? Because he wasn't even on my radar. But you said, MVS is out, and, Aaron Rodgers literally asked or said, I'm not signing until he comes back to play with me. So, yeah, if you want to mix him in large field tournaments, by all means, be our guest. I personally am not going to be playing him, especially with a guy at his profile at this point in his career. When you see a big game coming, I'm not sure that we can buy into it. And, for that reason, as they say, I'm out.
And are you willing to spend up on the Rodgers-Adams connection in this one on the road?
Yeah, I think so. I think Davante Adams is going to be very popular in tournaments, so just know that if you are going there, you're not going to be the only one doing it, as we talked about with cash games, but nothing negative to say about Davante Adams. And of course, we know when Davante has his huge games, 2 touchdowns and over 125 yards, it's because Aaron Rodgers goes off. So if you want Davante Adams in a tournament, by all means, bring Aaron Rodgers with you. I think he's going to have a great game.
Yeah, it's interesting. Before we move on, I'm seeing these 2 tight ends. We're talking about how weak the tight end position is. Somebody has to play there. Uzama had his career game last week. He's 3,000. Robert Tonyan has really disappointed, still at 4.3. That feels like I can save money elsewhere versus taking the shot with Tonyan and Rodgers.
Yeah, it's so tough because
he wants
these guys.
He
wants to give him the ball, right? He wants that, but is he going to? I'm not sure. And really, I think we would all be lying if we said that this is the breakout game for Robert Tonyan. We just don't know. But last week, season high in snaps, targets, and routes run. So certainly you can take a shot in a tournament. And the reality is with all these guys that are sitting between like 3.5 and 4,500 on DraftKings, like you're just hoping for a touchdown, really. So it's thin, it's tough, and I am not chasing CJ Uzama's huge Thursday Night Football performance. He had 5 combined targets the first 3 weeks of the season. No, thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Detroit at 0-4, heading up to Minnesota. The Vikings are 1-3. DK Sportsbook line has Minnesota -8, over under of 50 points. It was disappointing last week to not see that Cleveland-Minnesota game end up with more fantasy value. I think, a lot of people started Odell Beckham. A lot of people were interested in Thielen and chasing the, Cousins had been on a roll, and they put up 7 points. What's your approach to this one, and what are some of the stacks that you're comfortable with? I mean, when you see Detroit on the other side of the ball, I think you get excited, don't you?
You kind of have to. Yeah, and this is a game too, in a dome with really 2 bad defenses, 2 pretty bad secondaries. I know they made Baker look pretty awful last week, but there's as of Thursday when we're recording, 2 of the Vikings members of their secondary are on the COVID list, and I'm not sure if they tested positive or what the situation is, so monitor that. But an already weak secondary could be down a couple of starters, and so if that happens, we could certainly see a bit of a shootout here. I really like Justin Jefferson, as you pointed out this, in the cash game section. I think Kirk Cousins is a very viable tournament play. 25, 25.2, and 28.1 DraftKings points through the first 3 weeks of the season. Detroit ranks 30th in pass defense DVOA. So someone on the Vikings side is going to have a great game. And usually we say it's kind of tricky to predict who it's going to be. Not on this team, right? Like, look at where the end zone targets are going. These 2 guys, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, combining for 76% of the end zone targets in Minnesota. If Kirk Cousins is throwing touchdowns, it's probably to those 2 guys. So I will play at least 1 stack with Justin Jefferson, at least 1 stack with Adam Thielen, and then probably 1 with both of them, because if he goes off, it could be a big day for the entire team.
Tyler Conklin had a big week 2 weeks ago, got slowed down last week, but still had target share. He's another tight end to throw into the mix if you're taking you don't have the big guys to choose from this week. What do you do with Detroit? Jared Goff is top 5 in passing yards, so he's throwing the football. Teams have slowed T.J. Hawkinson down. Last week we got 2 touchdowns from Raymond. Quintez Cephas, if you don't pay attention to him, will go for 90. If you pay attention to him, he'll disappear. What's your approach with trying to capitalize on any of that yardage that we might see? And, like you said, it's a 50-point over-under. Both teams struggle on the defensive side of the ball. It feels like there's a tournament play there on the Detroit side.
It definitely does. And I'm not really chasing the wide receivers. And it's probably because when I play, I'm more playing in those smaller field tournaments. So 400 to 800 on average entrance. I'm not, entering these huge, thousands and thousands and thousands of people tournaments. In those kind of settings, for sure, mix in a couple of these pass catchers or take a dart throw on one of them. But really, I'm looking at the 2 household names here. It's DeAndre Swift and it's TJ Hawkinson. And, outside of 2 weeks ago, when Hawkinson had, I think it was 2 targets, he's been seeing a lot of volume. And we talked about it on a slate where there's not a lot of options at tight end. he could certainly be one that pays off his salary and then also leads the tight end position on the slate. So I think he's fine as a bring back. And then what's your temperature on DeAndre Swift? Because I'm excited about him as 8-point underdogs, that he could just rack up a ton of PPR volume on DraftKings. And that's really what we want from him. We kind of want him playing as a wide receiver, not, Derrick Henry, run between the tackles over and over kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to ignore whatever sentence or two is coming out of Lions camp every single week. It's like last week, you're going to see a lot more of DeAndre Swift. And, well, it was technically true, 73% of snaps, but no production. And then this week, it's a hot hand approach with Jamal Williams. Look, DeAndre Swift is an elite pass catcher. The Vikings are heavy favorites. I think you just jump right back in. You don't react to last week's disappointment, so I'm with you on that. Swift is one of the most electric players in the game, and there's an opportunity here, and maybe in tournaments you're going to see a lower roster percentage just because of how burnt people felt last week.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, let's hop into the mailbag.
Mailbag.
All right, if you have questions for future episodes, you can send them in to @Kyle_Borg or @TheFantasyPT. Let's jump in here. Aaron writes in from Twitter, I know Allen Robinson hasn't been good so far this year, but does his price this week on DK entice you at all to play him now or in the future, even with a bad matchup on paper? It's a good question, especially in light of the transition to Justin Fields. Allen Robinson this week is at 5,500 on DraftKings. How are you feeling about this one? I think it's one of the biggest topics in fantasy.
Not great. I'm not sure. There's no real other way to put it, right? I mean, it's been awful for the player, as good as he is and what you expected, especially in redraft leagues at his ADP. Seeing him at 5.5K is just silly, right? Like, it's an auto click. It seems like it should be anyway, but there's valid concerns, obviously, about the offense and about rookie quarterback play and Darnell Mooney and all those sort of things. Now, with that being said, no one, and I mean no one, is going to click the button on Allen Robinson this week. So if you do want to play, that kind of game theory mindset of, well, I know I'm going to create huge leverage on the field, I think it's totally fine. I'm not looking there personally, and again, in those smaller field tournaments that I play, I'm not playing him, but if you're in these huge field tournaments, no one's going to be playing him, so I think it's totally viable.
I feel like we're all being set up by Allen Robinson himself to, once everybody gives up and quits, he'll go out and remind us who he is. That being said, I'm with you. It's like Justin Fields completed 11 passes in a victorious effort. Like 11 passes. That was an old Allen Robinson great day, as 11 catches, like just by himself. So very scared to go out on a limb with Robinson, but you're right. I mean, the price point is so tempting. Let's go to a question here from Josh. Josh Dillman says, is Samaje Perine a cash lock for the game theory of moving with the crowd and him being so cheap? I assume this is in a no Joe Mixon situation.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing with DFS is everyone falls all over themselves to play the backup running back when the starter is out, because it kind of feels like you have this like golden ticket and they're usually very cheap. And he is the stone min for a running back on DraftKings at 4K. That being said, he's Samaje Perine. So really
it's one of the things working against him is who he is at the core.
Yeah, and you know what it is? I'm still just burnt by spending like the 5th overall pick in a dynasty rookie draft on him like 4 years ago or whenever that was, that everyone loved him. But the reality is when you don't play a cheap running back, if assuming Joe Mixon is out, he's going to be one of the most heavily rostered players in the field because of his price tag. And you have to be willing to ask yourself, how do I get buried by this player? If Samaje Perine goes out and gives you 13 points in a cash game, that's probably good enough. In a tournament, it's not going to bury you. So I think that if he does play, he's a cash game consideration. But in tournaments, he would be an obvious no play for me because of the fact that he'd be so popular. And I don't know, what's his ceiling, would you say? Like 15 points, 16 points?
Yeah, at the most. I mean, one of the things that they reacted and they, in redraft leagues and things, they spin up on Perine, but he was seeing the field on third down with Joe Mixon. And you kind of wonder if you're going to see more of a everyone would react with Eckler. If Eckler went down, they'd react with Justin Jackson. No, that'd be Roundtree, right? Like Roundtree's going to come in and play that role, and Jackson might play third down. You could have Chris Evans come in, and P. Ryan could have the exact same role, and then you're burnt. So I have some hesitancy there. The matchup is whatever. I think they're going to put more on Burrow. So yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared of Samaje, and like you said, the ceiling. I guess he could score a couple times if they really gave him everything, but I don't put the odds very high.
Yep, I'm with you.
Sola Felix 29. I like this. I want to talk about it. Ricky Seals-Jones is my punt this week. Have I gone too far?
I just can't. I'm just listening to Jason
in
my ear. Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. I mean, that catch on Thursday Night Football a couple weeks ago was awesome.
So good. It was so good.
I don't know. And on any other slate, I might just say, like, don't bother kind of thing. But we talked about it. Like, there's no strong plays at tight end outside of the top couple of names. I think anyone really is in play as a punt option this week, especially if you're playing their quarterback. If you're going to play Taylor Heineke or something like that, I think he's fine.
I'm going to build. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build a Heineke, Ricky Seals-Jones stack right now.
All right.
That's what I'm going to do. While you discuss the merits of playing him, I'm going to ignore any negatives you say and build the lineup out right here, now.
Are you genuinely excited about Ricky Seals-Jones?
Excited isn't the word, but I see the path, right? Like you have Curtis Samuel that's likely to he's going to have limited snaps. He could miss the game. We don't know what his involvement's going to be. TMC is there, but look, I think Ricky Seals-Jones could see more targets than any of us are comfortable with. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
It could be a surprisingly good performance from Ricky Seals-Jones at 2,500. And last week everybody was fawning over the Will Disley opportunity, and I can't see this Ricky Seals-Jones opportunity as worse than that one. I actually think it might be a little bit better.
And really in cash games too, like if you put up a 0 with your tight end at that cheap, it kind of doesn't matter. So
right.
He's totally fine.
All right, last one here. Toru writes in, can you discuss the process behind picking contests to enter and to fade? What influences are the strongest in that decision? Number of entries, prize pool, entry fee, etc. It's a good question. I echo this to you. How do you view these?
Yeah, it's sort of a loaded question because there's many ways to answer it, but it's sort of it depends answer. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on your bankroll, how comfortable you are entering contests as far as their entry fee. It depends on how long you've been playing DFS, if you've been successful with your process or not. So it's really tough to answer from a do this sort of standpoint. But for me, my process is more as a cash game player. I'm looking at contests that have a maybe not as top heavy as a payout, but still are easy to cash in, because there's nothing worse than like firing off dart throws after dart throws after dart throws in tournaments and just losing week after week after week. I mean, it takes a lot of mental stamina to do that.
I don't know what you're talking about. What is this losing thing that you're talking about? I've heard about it, but I'm not familiar. No, I don't do that.
You're part of like the 1% of the crowd that just fires in the Millie Maker and wins.
That's right. That's right. Now, this is the worst thing that could have happened to me, because even though I won, well, I shouldn't say it like that, but even though I won, I'm like committed to Millie Makers for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? I'll give it back over the next 10 years, chasing the high of that 1 week.
Right, for sure. But to answer this question, I would say evaluate what your risk tolerance is and evaluate what your bankroll is, and then go from there. And I've said it a couple times on the show already, but for me, I prefer to play in those smaller size tournaments. I think you can win more often, and I think that you're more likely to see a better ROI on consistency basis, which is more important to me, maybe not to someone else who has more risk tolerance. That's just what it comes down to.
All right. Well, cool. This was fun. I'm glad we got a chance to hang out, talk a little DFS. We appreciate, I know myself, I'll speak for our listeners too, that appreciate everything you guys do each and every week, bringing your insights to the DFS world. I love hearing from listeners that have benefited, that have had the success that they've had. And let me just say this from our side of things, because, we're in the Slack channel, we're in the DFS channel, we're talking about what's going on with the show. Those of you out there, Kyle and Betsy, get hyped when you succeed. They have reached that point, just like we have on the footballers side, where your success is the weekend. Like if their picks they hit, they're hyped about that more than their own winnings, and that's exciting for all of you. And you've got two great guys here, so I've just been thrilled to be able to join you this week. And obviously, I'm going to go out and win another Millie Maker this week, and I think DFS will be my thing at that point.
Yes. No, as Andy said, we love when you guys win. We love when you send us your screenshots. That is the success of the show, the DFS Pass. So yes, if you haven't already, come check out the DFS Pass. The price, Andy, I'm just going to say this straight up to you. The price is ridiculous. It is far too cheap. Use the code DFS Pod, save some cash on that, and come play with us because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and they can go to ballersdfs.com to enter weekly contests, right?
That's right.
You'll be directed right to the DraftKings League, the Fantasy Footballers DFS Borgen Bets contests. I see them popping through all the time, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's a great contest to invite your friends to, first-timers, and I've gotten into a couple of them as well. So without further ado, we got another weekend of football ahead of us.
Yes, we do.
It was fun hanging out, Betsy.
I think it's DeAndre Hopkins week. DeAndre Hopkins for all the money.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Take care.
See you guys
everybody.
next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.